I think we've got a really big misconception in this country that we're abnormal right now. We need to get back to normal when in fact we're actually normal now. 0% is not normal.
The opinions expressed in this program are for general informational purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual or on any specific security. It is only intended to provide education about the financial industry. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult your financial advisor prior to investing. Any past performance discussed during this program is no guarantee of future results. Any indices referenced for comparison are unmanaged and cannot be invested into directly. Any references to performance of securities are thought to be materially accurate and actual performance may differ. As always, please remember investing involves risk and possible loss of principal capital. Please seek advice from a licensed professional.
And we are back. Welcome to another edition of the Daily Dots. And I am joined as always by the brain trust himself, Mr. Chase Taylor. And we're back at it, man. We were just saying it's been a while. We had an overturned fuel. It's like the fates were conspiring against us meeting here in the office.
Yeah, a radioactive car accident, literally.
Seriously?
Yeah, it was radioactive material. It took them hours and hours to get it all cleaned up.
No,
I think it happened at like midnight. Yeah.
Wow, I did not know that.
We could not get to work yesterday at like 8 a.m. because of it, and it happened at midnight.
Yeah. I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world. You know, beautiful thing about this job is you can do it from anywhere. And like I was telling you, we're here, but you have to you got to catch a breather in this job in July and August because it just naturally slows down. And the flip side, the rest of the time is, you know, doing this job is sort of like having a unyielding master, you know, because even if you're off, markets are open.
Yep. You
know, like even when I'm on vacation, I'm up every morning at the open, check. You know what I mean? Like you can't unattach. A lot of times I'll check the open and I'll know that, you know, everybody's on top of it and I'll go back to sleep and catch another hour or so. But you're always on. And I love it. I'd get bored, but it can feel like an unyielding taskmaster at times.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but you know, it's every job's got its downsides. We've been looking at other stuff this morning. We didn't get any data out today, right?
You got UMISH.
Okay.
I think that was it. There may be like some other like tier 2, tier 3 stuff. I know we do get the tick data later, the treasuries kind of flow data, which is getting interesting these days to look for like capital outflows and stuff, but that one doesn't come out just yet. But the UMISH was pretty ugly and inflation expectations back on the rise. UMISH is crap data though. So you have to take it with a grain of salt. It's not nothing. You have to look at it, but like, you know, it's low quality and very volatile. So it's more of a long-term trend stuff versus like month to month for me. And I actually you can, this is interesting maybe to people. You can look at how Republicans respond, Democrats respond, and independents respond. And naturally, because they break it down that way, as soon as like the White House flips, you know, all the data flips. Like all of a sudden, the one party is like, "Well, everything's terrible now," and the other one's like, "No, it's great now. It was terrible yesterday. Now it's amazing." So what I like to do is pull out just the independents, see what the independents think. It's a little more clean way of looking at it. So that's what I tend to do. Is like, what do independents think about long-term inflation, stuff like that.
I think, and this is the primary thing that I was looking for. We got many things to discuss here. I think that this whole inflation debate, I'm starting to view it as, I think it is a complete mess. I think that it is a mess driven by a lack of understanding. I think it's a mess driven by a lack of standardized terms or people not understanding those terms, different kinds of inflation. I don't think the administration is being as clear, and I don't think they're messaging it as good as they could. But there's something really interesting, and I want you to keep an open mind in this discussion because I know that something that you and I will both agree on, and we have agreed on, and that I think any reasonable person can agree on this. Now, if you think that Donald Trump is the genesis of all evil in the history of mankind, you're probably not going to agree on this, and that is that I am not saying Scott Bessent is not given to or not prone to or not pressured to, and maybe not even guilty of carrying Trump's water, carrying the party line on things he doesn't know are accurate. But really interesting line that came out that Bessent now is calling for 150 basis point rate cut. Can I hold on? I understand the initial knee-jerk response. Okay, but Bessent is not a guy. He's already said he doesn't want to be the head of the Fed, right? Publicly.
Yeah.
He's already a billionaire. It's a head scratcher. It's a head scratcher because looking at the data, I don't see it. But I got to believe Bessent's looking at something. I don't. Here's my issue. Occam's razor. I just see it more likely that he's actually seeing something that he thinks deserves that set of a rate cut rather than just saying, oh, it's just nonsense. He's just carrying Trump's water. Not saying it's not possible. It doesn't make sense for him. I don't see that. If you're talking about a younger, less accomplished guy that isn't rich already and all that, okay, maybe he wants to get a seat at the power. But what is I think Bessent is a sharp dude. I think he's shrewd. I think he understands markets. I think he's got a good track record. If he's calling for that, if he here's my point. If he really didn't think that, he'd just keep his mouth shut.
Maybe not. I mean,
of course, maybe not. Like, I'm not saying I know this unequivocally.
I think to be in the administration, you got to do a lot of water carrying. So I beat Bessent up a lot, and it's because I think he knows better than a lot of this kind
What's
of stuff.
his motivation?
Well, do what the boss says or lose your job.
He's got as much money as Trump. Why he doesn't need that? He needs this job like he needs a hole in his head.
That's not the way he acts. He acts like this is everything for him. So here's a different way you could frame it. Once you've accomplished what he's accomplished in his former career, what else do you have other than like?
So you're going to go nuke your credibility?
I mean, he is doing that in my opinion, but
not if he ends up being right.
So what he specifically cited for what he referred to was 150 to 175 basis points lower in rates was estimates of the neutral rate. The problem with that is there are no estimates of the neutral rate that are that low. There never have been, and there aren't now. Like, he basically just made some stuff up. I think if you think the neutral rate is 150 basis points lower than here, that's just not a credible thing, in my opinion. Now, if you want to say, look, I think the labor market's about to break, so let's go cut rates, please. Like, I think that's an argument you can make that, look at the data and go, that's possible. But to say neutral rates way below here, this is like super restrictive rates. We'll tell that to stocks, tell that to bonds, tell that to financial conditions, to unemployment, to household income, to household consumption, like anything.
Okay, so back to Occam's razor, right? What if, and this to me, the conclusion I've come to, now this is total speculation on all of our, right? We're spitballing, we're reading the tea leaves, all that kind of stuff. But the Occam's razor to me, when I look at this assessment, I think what's happening, and this gets back to my issue with the administration messaging things the way they are. They sound and look like guys to me that despite what they're giving lip service to, that they understand that there is no going back to normal, right? Like I think we've got a really big misconception in this country that we're abnormal right now. We need to get back to normal when in fact we're actually normal now. 0% is not normal. The Fed funds rate at 4.5 is right smack dab in the middle of a historical average. It's on the low side still, right? You and I both have said multiple times, our only way out is the way that this is going to culminate is by us inflating our way out.
Right.
I think that they completely know that.
Yeah.
That they realize that to get inflation down to target rate would cause unemployment to go too high, which I think are odds on favor. Yep. And this is where I'd come out. Just tell us that.
Yeah.
Just say that.
Right.
Look, I don't even think it's that toxic. I think you can still play politics with it, right? Because you always got to, again, when I say these things, I'm not saying them. I'm not saying they should do this. I'm saying that if you think anybody's going to come out on either side of the party and do any big tone shift or move or announce something like that without also simultaneously playing politics and making sure it doesn't hurt their political chances, you're lying to yourself.
Right.
DC ain't full of a bunch of altruistic actors.
Plus, it's worth noting, like, the bond market's not pricing that. So if you come out and say, we're running it hot, we don't care if inflation's 4%, the bond market will say, I'm sorry, what? And then you got to deal with the bond market, not to mention the politics.
I think they're trying to thread a needle, is what I'm saying.
Of course, yeah.
And I think that's what they're trying to do. And I hadn't even thought about that side of it. You're right. That's why you wouldn't come say it, right? But I kind of think it's to me, it feels like a little bit of an economic 800-pound gorilla in the room where you're like, hey, guys, the days of 3% growth with 2% inflation are over.
Yeah, very much so.
That's over. So we're going to have to run it hotter. We're going to have to.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of one of my things where I'm like, okay, well, am I all pissed off at Trump and Bessent because they're doing what I know they've got to do?
I think that's a fair argument. It's just hard to watch them twist themselves into weird pretzels along the way to try to explain it. It's just hard to watch. And that's where I come from, is like,
I agree.
Be a little more real about it. I understand that you can't just be like, you know what, who cares about bonds? Like, we're just gonna
right
inflate, and you can't say 4% inflation is fine, because if you look at polling of what voters think, like, the number one issue for voters is inflation, and it's not close. And like, the president's approval ratings have dropped a lot on that, like, already. So like, it's clear, like, it's issue number one, and it's already becoming costly for them. So if they do let it run to 4%, it's going to be a problem. So maybe the best solution is to sit there and say, no, it's not, no, it's not, no, it's not, no, it's not, or just blame Jerome Powell for not cutting rates. I don't know.
I mean, or do what you and I have, well, I don't know so much you, but do what I think the Fed has effectively been doing for 40 years, which is just doctor the numbers lower.
What do you mean?
I don't mean like doctor, like fixing them. I'm just saying, like, look, the CPI formulation has been altered 4 times since 1980, something like that.
And they move components around all the time.
Yeah,
like twice a year or whatever. So,
and never once in those formulation changes has it resulted in higher CPI. Right. It's always engineered lower.
Yeah, that's the incentive.
Yeah, well, exactly. Now, there are also, again, like most things in life, I was trying to explain hedonic adjustments to my kids the other day. Yes, I am that nerdy. Like, yeah, and their eyes were rolling over too. I know you don't think that's nerdy, right?
No,
like,
I think it's a very tough problem.
Yeah.
It's one where, like, you get mad at them for doing it, and then you think about it, and, like, but it kind of makes sense. Like, it's just tough.
That's why I
didn't get a degree in statistics.
Right, and it highlights one of the issues of statistics, right? When we start going down that path, then we get to a point where it's like, well, I don't think you should hedonically adjust that. And they're like, well, I do. I think I should. Right. And you get into the disagreement. Although I do think that there are some very clear cut things, right? Like, for instance, when the Fed tries to make an argument that the cost of cars hasn't gone up in 30 years,
right?
Just go fly a kite.
But at the same time, how much better is a car compared to what it was 30 years ago?
It is, but it does not help me make any more money. It does not optimize my time anymore. It does not do any better. Now, will it give me a longer life and less maintenance costs? Sure, which justify
some of that,
a higher price. It doesn't justify a tripling of the underlying cost, right? Because that triple cost does not bring, like, to me, the great counterbalance to cars in this argument would be phones. Right? Like, and the analogy I always use is, look at the amount the average American family spent on telephones in 1985 compared to what they spend now. And if you looked at that as pure inflation, it'd look horrific. It looks Zimbabwean, right?
But once you adjust it, it's like, oh, it's not bad at all.
Well, no, because think of how many hours of productivity that phone delivers to me, the freedom it delivers to me, the money it's helped me make, right? Like, you can't, it's my life.
If anything, it's been radical deflation in reality.
Yes. The fact, one of the best things that's happened to my personal productivity is the cost of phones going up 15x over the last 25 years. Like, sounds weird to say it, but it is, right? Cars, not at all, right? And this is where it comes down. Like, this is where the issue is, because if they do what everybody else has done, and it's kind of starting to make this attack on the BLS make a little bit more, it resonates a little bit more. They're going to try to say that inflation isn't as high as it is.
Oh, yeah. I think that's pretty clearly coming at some point.
Yeah. And the other frustrating thing is, I think
the problem is like that's something you can't get past the public. The public knows what.
No, but the public, the tough part about it is what the public needs to understand is that I very much believe you're in a tough spot, which is, guys, you got to pick. The days of picking between multiple good options is over. Okay.
What kind of tax do you want to pay?
Right.
At the end of the day, that's the question.
In the pain of inflation is greater than the pain of breadlines, unless inflation gets extraordinarily out of hand, right? Which I don't see us on the cusp of hyperinflation or anything like that. But I just wish we could. I just wish, and I understand. I thought the point that you made about bonds was really good. We just, the subterfuge and the lack of, like, it's gotten to a point where you can understand the lack of truth, right? You can understand the service or the purpose it serves, right? Like you said, there's things you can and can't come out and say, right? And you can't, even if it is internally your plan to let it run hot 4.5%, you can't come out and say that because you'd lose the back end. But I kind of think you're at a point with this government where we need radical transparency. And I think that any pain that you suffered on the bond side, I think that you could probably talk to central banks around the world and try to rein that in, try to get control of it. But we just there is such a distrust of, and rightfully so, of government agencies and institutions and all that kind of stuff. I don't think we can get this back on track in any way, shape, or form unless we start having radical honesty and radical transparency.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you've got, I mean, and part of the issue is at any given time, you got anywhere between 50 to 70% of the populace believing, and even more in some cases, believing something that just factually isn't correct, right? And that's a problem.
It's a huge problem.
It's a huge problem. Meaning, how many average guys out there do you think are walking around understanding what we're saying right now, which is, no, guys, you don't understand. You don't get one or the other. You got to pick. Do you want higher unemployment? Or do you want to deal with 4 to 5% inflation? That's your choice.
And it's important to say, like, you run this giant debt up, you have to pay for it, and you can raise taxes and go pay for it that way and reduce services, or you can get inflation. I want to read a Keynes quote that I ran into this past week that nails this. He said, "What is raised by printing notes is just as much taken from the public as is a beer duty or an income tax. What the government spends, the public pays for. There is no such thing as an uncovered deficit."
Yep.
Like that nails it.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. It's funny how, I was an anti-Keynesian. I was proud to say it. Right. It's so funny how he's so misunderstood.
Yeah. For me, he was a lot like Teddy Roosevelt or something, where, like, when I was young, fire breathing libertarian, I'm like, this guy's trash.
Yeah.
And then, like, the older I get and I go back and read, I'm like, oh, I kind of see where he's coming from now. It's the same for Keynes. Like, he got plenty wrong, of course, but I mean, he basically birthed, macroeconomics and was pretty good investor, pretty good thought leader, was ahead of his time on some big thoughts.
Well, and then here's the problem with modern Keynesians. They're not really Keynesians.
Yeah.
They're print all the time, where he was all about running surpluses during expansions and running deficits during recessions. And, like, for all the people like, oh, that's the Keynesians they're not Keynesians. They forgot all about the surplus part. Yeah.
I mean, it's just like MMT. Like,
yeah.
Well, to be fair, it's any school of thought, like, has a two sides of the coin, except for when times get tough, no one wants to flip the coin over, right? That's humans, right?
Yeah, and this is the part that really frustrates me with the academic system that I was thinking about, because I think when I look back to my educational experience, first of all, a lot of it happened outside of the classroom, but at several points in my life, I had very key people that reiterated the same thing to me over and over, which is, what you learn is not nearly as important as learning how to think critically, right? And the Socratic method, the reintroduction of that, where you get kids to understand, hey, okay, that sounds great. What is the cost of that? For instance, I would love in a non-emotional way to be able to get a bunch of these Mamdani supporters in a room and go, okay, what is it that you're frustrated about? And go, okay, so we've got common ground, right? We see the same problem. Okay. I think it would be better to deal with it with a different solution for these reasons. No. And you go, okay, but you're forgetting about the costs of what you do. See, everything every adult knows is whatever I do, there's a cost. Even if it's just opportunity cost, there's some cost involved. And, again, we've talked about this a million times, but it's a lack of critical thinking. It's not just that they believe the wrong thing. You listen to their internal protocol or operating system, and you're sitting there going, you're not capable of getting to the right decision because you're not asking the questions, right? You're trying to figure out which tribe sounds better to you. And your tribe's full of a bunch of idiots, or it's run and led by people that are purposefully trying to obfuscate and trying to redirect and, are working on ulterior motives. And that to me is one of the toughest parts, because if we can't critically think, if we can't all agree on some baseline things that are true, I don't know where you go from that. And you no longer have a functional democracy. And in the past, it was just disagreements on, we all wanted to go to the same direction, was disagreements on the best way to get there. That's no longer the case.
Exactly.
And I don't know where you go with that. I don't know what you do with that.
We struggle to even agree on problems, much less, solutions these days. And the Mamdani thing is interesting to me because of what we were just talking about. Like, in my opinion, the reason this guy has risen is because there's a significant cost of living crisis in New York. So going back to inflation, like,
it's one of the reasons I don't live there, by the way.
You run, well, it's not cheap here, folks, but
it ain't New York prices.
If you have a cost of living crisis, like, it has really significant, downstream impacts, and that, I think that's one of them. So if we do go into this run it hot and then we pretend like it's not hot, you're going to have, not a New York cost of living crisis, but an American cost of living crisis, while pretending there's not one. And that has really big earthquake, political consequences downstream. So it's one of the reasons you can't pretend like it's not happening.
It's kind of a let them eat cake kind of thing.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Now, and to further make the problem worse is whenever it does cause a cost of living crisis, the tool of the policymakers to throw money at it. That's all we all know how to do, right? And then obviously that does not create deflation. So
no, but and this is what kills me. You'll sit there and see somebody, that's out of control. Like, yeah, so that's why we should probably advocate for a 25% reduction in Social Security payments. Wait a second. And that to me, look, am I saying that that's what I'm for? No. And there's something, but my point is, hey, everybody get ready. Okay. Because you're all going to have to deal with things that are the less than optimal, and probably considerably so. Why? Because we've been living on a fake credit card for too long. The jig is up. Like, it just is. Let's be adults. Let's take it on the chin. Realize that we outran our runway. We got to reconfigure things here, and it's not going to be fun. Like, that's adulthood. We don't get our cake and eat it too, right? Like, this is hardcore adulting.
Yeah, that's not how this is going to go down.
No, it's not. And that, like I said, that is such a frustration for me, because I hate the fact that there's subterfuge and misdirection as it comes from administrations. At the same time, I understand the quote unquote need for it in this environment. I hate the fact that the average guy on the street, like, you want to look at inflation, this, and you go, what did you think was going to happen? When you saw $1 trillion and $2 trillion and $1.5 trillion, you didn't think that it was going to end up here? You know what I'm saying? Like, if you're appalled by inflation, you're part of the problem. You're going to splash the pot with $8 trillion and not see any side effects? And again, I'm not putting it all on the working guy either. I'm trying to illuminate what a tangled mess this is. Like I said, I always going to stay optimistic and always going to be looking for potential to change things and turn corners and head in a better direction. But I'm like I said, if you can't get back to the truth, if we can't all get to a point where we agree that the sky is blue, I don't understand how you're fixing these problems. If you think that socialism, and again, I'm not saying this to spit on you or push you down or denigrate you or whatever. I understand why people are frustrated and want to try different things, but that's not a different thing. It's failed every time it's been tried. It exacerbates the same problems you're currently running from. And if you don't think so, come look at Seattle. We're already several steps ahead of you, and it's made everything worse. Yeah. Less housing, more expensive housing, bigger homeless problems. It's like,
well, I'll push it in an uncomfortable direction, and that is, I feel like currently we are starting to flirt with a different kind of very proven to fail strategy, and that is, in my opinion, what we're teasing right now is starting to remind me a lot of Peronism in Argentina, where the government has a super central role in everything: import taxes, export taxes, import licenses, export licenses. Everything goes through, investment decisions. We'll buy some Intel. We'll, buy some of this. Like,
I agree with you.
Everything's funneling through DC.
I agree with you, but
in a way that I think everyone, like truly bipartisan, everyone in America 20 years ago, but we're like, whoa.
We've seen this happen before.
And the people that most would have, put the red flag up would have been conservatives to say, whoa, like we're not running that stuff through DC. Like, we're capitalists. And I think I remember, I think it was Russell Napier, I think, that said, it's turning into like capitalism with Chinese characteristics, and it's uncomfortable. And but at the same time, like I do think we do need industrial policy, like let's highlight these big things we can't lose on, and backstop them. So like it's tough, because part of it's like, okay, I see the logic, I support some of this logic, but at the same time, the autarky stuff, the like, hey, let's just be self-sufficient in everything. It's like, no, well, hold on. Like that's what like really got Argentina into this mess, was they decided to do everything for themselves. And then, just layers of, the executive getting to sign off on everything. Like it's very concerning to me.
It's been very concerning for me for 20 years.
But some of this is new, like an export tax that we've never seen that.
No, but that, I mean, look, this is, I think you're talking about a feature of government. I mean, the ever creeping thing. I mean,
no doubt. We've talked about this, the ratcheting effect of the imperial presidency.
Yeah. And we've seen
the ratchet's spinning quick.
Yeah. And I mean, look, I don't want to jump into the dream, like the pastime dream of every guy between the age of 25 and 45 and resort to Rome. But we've seen this before. Okay. Like, one of the things that's interesting about history is all too often the breakdown of Roman civilization is sort of hung on the authoritarian aspirations of the emperor. And everybody forgets that the incalcitrance and the total ineffectiveness of the Senate is effectively what granted all that power to the emperor.
That's exactly what we're seeing now.
Here we are.
So like that's a perfect example, because the Intel thing, what they're talking about doing is taking the CHIPS Act money and doing it with, which to me, obviously you can't do that, right? Like the law says what can be done with the money. That isn't one of the things it says. But I and maybe I'm wrong, maybe I haven't seen it, but I have not seen anyone from Congress go, hold on, like you can't do that. Like we pass the law, we'll decide what happens to that money. We have the power of the purse, not you. If you want to do something with Intel, there's probably a way you can do that through DOD or whatever, but like you're not doing it with CHIPS Act. Like I haven't seen anyone say that. Like,
yeah, well, and I think the problem, at least here in the United States, is metastasized even further than that. I think it's also one of the reasons that you're seeing the rise of lawfare, meaning courts are stepping in where legislators should. And that is something that is also very concerning.
Extremely. Yeah.
Because I don't care whether you like the rule or you don't. Courts have absolutely zero constitutional power to legislate. And they're legislating on a daily basis. So are regulatory bodies. Trump at least has taken some steps to address that, and he needs to keep doing it, because when laws or effective laws are being passed by unelected bureaucrats, you don't have a democracy. You just don't.
Yeah.
Because you've got no way to hold them accountable.
Right. And I don't think that's better having it all fall under the executive. I think it's tremendously worse. And that's a trend. The regulatory parts has been a trend. The judicial part's a trend. And we have talked about this show before, but like the congressional just like release of responsibility on everything.
Well, and look, then you really start to understand, okay, this is why states' rights are so important. And this is the downside of ceding so much control to a centralized government.
Right.
Right? Because, and people are like, well, why would it be any different? Because all of a sudden you got 50 states effectively competing, right? That's why. That keeps the balance, right? We've gotten way too federalized. We really have. And I think we're suffering the side effects from it.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And the more centralized you get, the more power you're putting in the Senate's hands, which actually makes them less likely to do anything.
The opinions expressed in this program are for general informational purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual or on any specific security. Any references to performance of securities are thought to be materially accurate, and actual performance may differ.
And speaking of, when I was a fire-breathing libertarian, I used to be like a heavy proponent, and I don't know if I still am, but of repealing the 17th Amendment, like allowing the states, because the state legislatures used to be the ones that picked senators, not regular voters. Like the states put their people in. Part of me wants to go back to that because I'll say it, I don't trust people to vote for people. But on the flip side, like I don't really trust the states to get it right either. I feel like the states 100 years ago had state legislatures that were much more, grounded and thoughtful and not tribal and just trying to put the right people in Washington. More so. Now I'm like, do I want the state legislatures in some of these states picking? No.
Well, yeah.
It's a tough problem.
It's so multi-layered, right? I mean, for instance, politicians have become somewhat of a celebrity, right? Big time. And that trend has increased to the point where you got a guy that, did
they're just influencers at this point.
Yeah, they're influencers. That didn't used to be the case. You go back 100 years ago, a senator could walk into a restaurant in Manhattan and nobody knew who he was. That ain't the case anymore. And the senator today doesn't want no one to know who he is, right? Like that's the other part of it too. They're attention whores. But the minute you do that, you're attracting a completely different class of people. There have always been opportunists and people that were aspiring authoritarians that seek public office. That's not new, right? But you also had a lot of people that felt a sincere civic duty and had successful careers and had been productive members of society and did it as truly a public service. That's not the case anymore. It's a career, right? If not a platform for something bigger, right? Like it's just the way it's thought of. It's a career arc.
Yeah, they're heavily sponsored influencers.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. And look, I'm not all dour. I'm an optimist, but I feel like I'm looking at a Gordian knot here. Like just how do you uncouple this? How do you untie this? And like I said, the legal situation, I mean, that's one that people really aren't paying. I mean, we talk about lawfare and we talk about those things. I hate that even that's gotten so partisan, because my whole thing is, guys, the tragedy is not the partisan aspect. The tragedy is that it's possible.
Exactly.
Right. I don't care which side the gun was pointed at. The issue I have is that it was loaded.
And it's just obvious where it ends up, right? Like,
yes.
So somebody backs down and stops and publicly says why they're stopping. Like, hey, like, I know my side's going to be mad at me because I'm not going to use it. I'm not going to use this weapon, but for the good of the country, like, we have to stop using this weapon. So I'm going to stop with the expectation that the other side stops. And like, we have to put this toothpaste back in the tube, or we all suffer dramatically. Like our kids suffer so significantly from it. Right.
Yeah. I like I said, I just feel a sense of urgency right now, because I definitely believe this. I think that we are in a tighter spot than anybody really realizes on multiple different levels. And I don't feel like that's being appreciated. And that makes me really nervous.
I concur. Yeah, big time.
And I think that we have gone a very, very long time without worst case outcomes.
Yeah.
And I think that has given birth to a sense of overconfidence that is not at all deserved.
Yeah. There's a lot of fragilities that have uncovered themselves in the last 10 years that I just didn't know there were aspects that were as weak as they are. And then it just keeps unmasking, and that's the challenging part. Yes, we're at the end of a fourth turning and, a long-term debt cycle. You could almost, in some ways, say like a cycle of America's empire is in its own way, making a big turn. Like there's all these reasons you can kind of look and like, well, this all kind of makes sense, in that historical lens. But I see a lot of people using that to make themselves feel better. And I do that too. But I think so many people, what they have with that is like, well, the last 3 times we hit a fourth turning, we won and everything was fine. It's like, yeah, but like, that's not how history works. Is sometimes you get to the fourth turning and you strike out, you don't battle back from 3-2 and hit the game winning home run.
Well, look, it's just numbers, but especially after you've been a country for 250 years and you've had an 80-year run of dominance. I mean, like those are all pretty significant historical milestones that have marked the beginning and end of a lot of stories. And none of those stories thought it was about to end either.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And and like everything else, what was the root cause of it? They lost sight of what got them there. Right. And I don't know how you don't look at the country today and go, that's 100% the case.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, the tribalism, guaranteed outcomes, like all this kind of stuff. You go to no, guys, we had that because we didn't do that. Right. Like again, cost benefit. I'm not saying I don't want the same thing you want. I'm saying that I think you're really miscalculating or underestimating the cost of what you want, right? Or even the possibility of what you want. For instance, I don't want to beat this dead horse, but like whenever I hear somebody use the word rent control to talk about overexpensive housing, I'm just, why aren't we still bleeding people, right? Bust out the leeches if you got a sickness. Let's get some of that blood out of you, right? Like, what were some other crackpot, thoughts? Don't wash your hands going into surgery. Let's give that a try. You know what I mean? Like, you're just like, no, God, no.
There's probably ways to get rent down. That just happens to not be a good one.
God, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be in favor of this, but I think you could probably make a greater case for partial government subsidy, like directly to the people buying it. You right. do not want to restrict private industry's ability to come in there and repurpose property. You don't want to do that. We're going to make it harder for you to build something, and that's going to make it more available.
There's thousands of pages of stats and literature suggesting how well it works. Like that one's just kind of obvious at this point.
Oh, golly.
But I'm glad you brought this up though, because one of my you talked about a fear being like, hey, when we get inflation going back again, is like, just you go tell the BLS like, let's not count it all the way. One of my fears is forget that, we just get price controls. Like talk about a proven terrible strategy, right? Of price controls. I'm convinced we're going to head back to that.
Look, it sounds.
It will be labeled as something completely different, of course, but I think that's where we're going to go. Not to mention capital controls, but
well, I'd be shocked if we went any other way, and the reason why is, I feel like if you and it's worked remarkably well, but if you want to predict government policy, just figure out the least costly way to kick the can. And that's the thing they're going to do next, right? So to not actually stare down the problem and address it. And price controls are yet another costly way to kick the can. But as you go down the road, each kick increases in cost.
Right.
And it becomes less costless, right?
to use my terrifying Argentina metaphor, like it's just like another one of those signposts that happened there that I'm like, oh, we're gonna do that, aren't we? I've been reading a bunch of books about like Argentine history and stuff. Like I just want the playbook of the failures. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So then you kind of list out a bunch of bullet points of like, don't do this, bullet points, and then you kind of watch. And you're like, there's one. You know, just like watching them get checked off, and you're like, please stop.
It's kind of like horses. And I'm not a horse expert. Some might say I don't even have horse sense. I would like to think I do, but it's kind of like horses, meaning I think that when you get into like thoroughbred horses, they're really fascinating. There's a lot more to them than most people think. There's personalities, there's styles, there's attitudes that they had. And if you go look at like the vast majority of a lot of the great thoroughbred champions, they were jerks. They were rude horses.
Yeah.
They'd bite their jockey. They'd bite the other horses. They were like Michael Jordan's, Kobe Bryant, right? You know, and they kind of had that air about them. They talked about Secretariat. Then they'd be walking him to the gates, he'd have his snout up in the air, and it's like he wouldn't even look at the other horses. It's like he was appalled by them. Like, how dare you run on the same track as I do, right? And it kind of reminds me of capitalism, right? Like, if you want the fastest horse, you're going to have to put up with a rougher ride at times, right? Like it might bite you occasionally. It might buck you off, right? But don't sit there and tell me you want to win the Kentucky Derby and then you want a horse that'll snuggle you in its stall at night. You know what I'm saying? And like, it's kind of one of those things, like you forget people are like, yes, capitalism made us great, all this kind of stuff, but you also have to simultaneously accept the downsides.
Right. I mean, they're a feature, not a bug in reality.
Yeah. They have to be, or it collapses on itself. Meaning those who are the most productive with assets should have the most of them. Now, I think we've done a lot of things in this country to short circuit capitalism on the other end of it.
Both sides.
Yeah. Meaning that I think so many of the excesses that built up, people blame capitalism for, and I'm like, no. I think it's as much a problem with quote unquote capitalism as overgrown bureaucracy,
government regulatory capture and stuff.
Yep. And so, you know, I think that we need to get back. And that's the other thing. Like, you know, people will gripe about, it's the rich are always winning. It's the big companies. They got all the power and And you look at them and go, dude, you have a stack of Amazon Prime boxes next to your house that's like a mile high. Okay. So I need you to be realistic. Okay. One of the reasons they've become monopolies is because the economics work. Okay. Not because they're evil and twisting their mustache. Okay. When you see that happening, don't look at the company. Look at the environment, right? Look at what's allowing it or what's incentivizing it. You know, that's what you got to look at. And when corporations get too big, the flip side is, where that mark is, I don't know. And it's one of the things, again, that you and I have agreed on in the past. I think one of the things you need to do is you need to get a lot of the best and brightest around in a room and redefine what modern monopolies are. And then going forward, we should probably recognize that we're going to need to revisit those kinds of laws probably every 20 to 25 years would be my guess, maybe sooner in this day and age.
Basically, like instead of a constitutional convention, have like a monopoly convention.
Yeah. Because with the way technology is changing the way, because you got to get back to the reason we had non-monopolistic, because capitalism, the oxygen to capitalism is competition, and monopolies crush competition. That's why, right? So we need to return to that level, thinking of it like that, right? It's like you got a whole swath of people. Oh, the reason we did stuff like that is because we don't want the rich taking all the money. No, yes, that is an ancillary byproduct of that, but that's not the primary reason why we did it. We did it to save capitalism, right? Like that's the irony,
right?
And it's like I said, once again,
and you see the effects in real time because our innovation with some of those businesses, like car companies, there's a very small amount, so they don't compete that great. And then you look at China, who has 100 of them that are competing viciously, and because of that, they're innovating better. So you can see in real time right now, like what happens when you let a few big ones get so big that, and they get to rewrite their own rules, and they get bailouts, all this kind of stuff. Like, well, downstream from that is you get less competitive, and that
you do. And there's just a basic human behavioral part of it, right? Which is when you're the young up and comer and you're competing against the new guy, you're going to take chances, right? You're going to take big, innovative chances. Yep. You're going to risk it. When you're Tim Cook and you take over Apple, you're trying not to ruin it.
Yeah.
Totally different deal. So the bigger on average, well, and Jonathan Tepper, we interviewed him. I can't remember. I'm forgetting the name of his book, but we interviewed him.
The Myth of Capitalism.
Yes. What was it?
The Myth of Capitalism.
The Myth of Capitalism. Yeah. And I would advise, regardless of what your economic preconceptions are.
I went into that book 100% sure I was going to hate it.
Yeah.
Like, I'd be mad about it.
Yeah.
The title triggered me.
Yep.
And then I read it in the book, and it's just like, okay, well, this is legit.
Yeah. And what he shows empirically is that the less, and I mean, it makes sense on the face of it, the less competition you have per sector, the less dynamic the growth is in that sector. Wage growth stalls out. Why wouldn't it? There's less competition. Yep. If you've got 12 firms competing for talent, you're going to have higher wages than if you have 3. Just the way it works.
And he gets into like the duopolies and monopolies and all that kind of stuff, where like it's not like a pure monopoly. Because I think some people are like, if there's not one giant monster, then it's not a problem. But the reality is, even when there's two monsters or 3 kind of implicitly working together, like it's still a giant problem.
If you have 3 companies controlling 97% of internet traffic, would you like me to simultaneously also believe that they're not talking and colluding in some way, shape, or form? Get out of here.
Yep.
Are they colluding in a way that's official that can get them in trouble? Probably not. They're probably slick.
Yeah.
But are they meeting at a really expensive restaurant and batting around some ideas that are mutually beneficial to them both?
They've done that for all history, so probably yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's like people, I don't believe in conspiracies. Well, okay, then you don't know anybody that's rich or powerful, right? Like, just period. Oh, rich guys get together and try to do a deal that benefits only them. Shocker, right? And that's where government's supposed to be. They're supposed to be the watchdog. Keep it fair, right? We're the referee, the economic referee. And yeah, I mean, and we can do that with safety nets. As a matter of fact, I think the only way you can pay for safety nets is if you have an economy that runs like that. Mm-hmm. Long term, right? Because the losses you're going to lose in productivity and wage, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, what we kind of went off on a tangent there.
Speaking of tangents, I got a new tangent for you.
Load me up
real quick, and that is, if there's any fans of the show, I wouldn't say Gilded Age on HBO.
Love it.
Yeah, great show. And something I learned just doing some research, or I should say we learned, because my wife and I were doing the research. But the Astor family, who is prominent in the show, he was essentially all racehorses are basically come from the first horses that he was breeding.
Really?
He had like one stud that is essentially the father of all modern American racehorses. It's kind of crazy little stat to come across, but
that is a crazy stat. We didn't even go over indexes yet today.
Yeah, well, let's do it.
And we're still 20 minutes from the close, but
so S&P down 0.2 at the moment. Q's down on 0.4. IWM down 0.4, equal weight down 0.2, Mag 7 down 0.15. All world ex-US up 0.4, so pretty nice outperformance day for the rest of the world. And that's because the dollar's down 0.35. Bitcoin down a little over 1, crude down another 1.4, been brutal lately. $63, barely hanging on. Gold flat, silver pretty close to flat, down a little bit. 2-year yield up another 2 basis points. 30-year yield up 5 basis points. On the chart, the 30 years breaking out from a downtrend line and blasting above the 50-day moving average. So that's notable.
What's the number on it? What's the handle?
We're at 492 on the 30-year. The 10 years up 4 bips, and it's at 432. And I wouldn't call it breaking out yet, but it's kind of testing it at the moment. So 30-year definitely showing a little more oomph there.
Okay, so obviously not drawing any conclusions, but we've talked about how we don't see any red blinking lights. I would say I see 2 right now. Now, 2 lights alone doesn't, but 2 lights that would have me very concerned. One, the 30-year. Hasn't done it yet, but you break out, that could be a serious problem here. The other one, you sent out a text last night that I wish you could have added a sound effect with it, because it should have been like, ooh, like the ghost. But when vol is going up, but volatility isn't,
and vol's down again today a little bit.
that's I've always interpreted that as a coiling spring.
Vol tends to get a little sneaky and start moving up before vol itself. It happens that way often. And speaking of, so today's OPEX, we had $1.6 trillion of options expire. So gamma flattens out a little bit going into next week, which just doesn't mean anything has to happen. It just means something can happen with, getting some downside that gets you into negative gamma, which allows more fireworks. But that can be upside or downside. Always worth repeating that. But then one thing I'm concerned about next week, now data is really light. We just have some housing stuff that probably won't move the market. But obviously we have JPOW Friday. And at the moment, we're at about an 85% chance for that cut in September. And remember, 2-3 days ago, we were at 111% chance. So it's come down a decent amount on these inflation numbers, obviously. Not to mention today's UMISH, like people back to worrying about inflation. If you look at everything JPOW said in the last 2 months, none of it is like really dovish, right? But obviously that jobs report was sketchy. That had to shake him some. But I feel like the odds of him being like, you know what, like this last inflation print, I'm not cutting into that. Like, I feel like the odds of that are there, or at least him not coming out and be like, yeah, we're cutting, signaling that. Now, it doesn't mean he's going to say we're definitely not, but I was talking to Jason about this, and he made a good point. Like, shouldn't he get that down to 50-50 odds with whatever his speech Friday, basically be targeting 50-50 on the September cut? And I think that's possible, and I don't think the market's ready for that. I mean,
if there was any other backdrop right now, I would say that no. But with the current I don't know.
Same. I think you can make a good argument for a cut or for a hold. But what I do know is the market is for them to cut.
If I would if you were advising, let's say Powell called me up and said, what do you think I should do? My advice would be to cut 25. I think that you can easily justify not cutting, but I think the issues that might cause, I mean, let's be honest. A 25 basis point cut,
and you can do a hawkish cut, right?
Yeah,
you can come out and massage it with your language.
A 25 basis point cut is not going to change any of the underlying realities. I mean, it could spark something to run. But what I'm saying is
it's not a big deal.
No,
right.
If all that happens is 25 basis point cut, it doesn't really change anything. But in this environment, and I'm not absolving Trump for any responsibility from this, he certainly shares some shouldering, if not the majority of it. I just think not cutting here ushers in potentially even uglier outcomes, not even economically, but just politically. And
yeah, but you can't have the Fed making.
No, you're right.
I know. Political pressure.
I know. But what I'm saying is,
I mean, you will, but you can't for now.
But what I'm saying is, if you really care about the economy in the country, again, I'll have to go to my cost assessment. I think that the cost of cutting 25 is less than the potential cost of not.
That may be the case. Yeah. I mean, that jobs print, it makes it to where it's not crazy to cut. That's the way I would say it. Like it justifies 25. Now, if I did 25, I would be like, look, this is not the beginning of a cycle.
Right.
This is one. We're going to watch what happens from here. Like the last jobs report, those revisions were enough for me to do this, or us to do this. This doesn't mean we keep going because, hey, look, inflation looks sketchy too. They both look sketchy.
Yep.
So I don't trust either one right now. But, if jobs got too close to teetering for me, so we're doing 25 and we're going to watch. Like, I think that would be a fair move. But after having let inflation get out of the bottle once, I wouldn't want to let it happen to me twice.
Okay, now the flip side is Trump has clearly ramped up the rhetoric more than we've ever seen any president go after the head of a Fed, right? I will say this, though, while we're sitting there talking, I think it is really hard to sit there and say that the tone of the Fed and the tone of Jerome Powell have changed substantially in a way that it does not appear as though the underlying economics justify it. Meaning, think about all the talk of soft landing, right? When was the last time you heard that? You haven't heard that terminology used in a long time. But what I'm saying is he kept, when he was keeping rates low before he started cutting, and guys like you and I were like, dude, what are you doing? You're going to run away. Soft landing. We got to play it cautious. Now, all of a sudden, Trump takes over and it's like playing it cautious is not cutting. I'm not saying that's his motivation. What I'm saying is we were sitting there having that conversation. I saw it from an angle where I was like, I can see why people think.
Totally. They cut pretty aggressively going into the election. Like I'm totally okay with anyone looking at that and be like, that
yeah.
Not saying it. They definitely did, but that just looked weird. You can't argue with that.
Yeah, because I think you're seeing employment data that looks worse than it did then.
But yeah, that's true. To be fair, in my opinion, they executed the soft landing. We reached the point to me where it's like, look, they won.
In the interim,
to me, they got it. Yeah.
Well, in the interim.
Well, you got to draw a line somewhere, right? You can't be like, well, 9 years later, we had a recession.
Oh, so. No. I agree. But I mean, like you had to, but the lines, the boundaries of this were going to get expanded because I mean, how big the action they took was.
The big hikes were 3 years ago now. Like to me, like they executed a soft landing.
Well, yeah, but I'm just saying that all those numbers are still moving. I mean, we got to see like
they never stop moving. That's what I'm saying.
So what I'm saying is we're seeing, and I'm not saying we're there yet, but we're seeing data that very much could be pointing to the idea of your target inflation rate is not possible while maintaining full employment. Full stop.
Yeah.
And to me, I don't think there's enough to it's a conclusion at this point. But to me, I think the data is pretty clear on that.
Right. You get to the point where, they will clearly, stagflation does this, right? If you get big stagflation, you reach the point where you got to kill one of those hostages. One of your mandates has to go.
Yep.
Like you got to feed the sharks with one of your mandates.
Yeah. And that's where I think we are.
I don't know which one of those. That's where I'm glad I'm not the Fed chairs, because I don't know which one of those you should throw overboard.
What would happen? Look, we're not going to get it, but let's just sit here and spitball. Let's say you cut 150 right now. What would happen?
The crazy thing to me is like, I don't think much. I think financial assets would rip short term.
Dollar would take a plunge short term.
Yeah. But I also think the long end would hurt you. It would go up. It would be mad about it. Inflation expectations would go flying higher.
Gold and Bitcoin would rip.
Yep. But I think a year after you did it, people will be looking around being like, where's the growth at? Like, I thought we'd get some growth out of that. And you just wouldn't. And again, like you're removing that interest income.
I know. And that's one part of it that it feels remarkably frustrating to me that more professionals and more people that discuss this don't talk about it. You go, guys, you got to know this. When you've spent a decade at zero, going down to 375 doesn't have anywhere near the pop it did the first time you did it.
Yeah. You used to get 100% of homeowners got the refi. This time it'll be 15-20% of homeowners get the refi.
I don't think it's going to even be that high, Chase.
Not
of all homeowners. You look at like what it's like.
I need to run that number.
I want to say last time I saw it was like 5 or 6% of homeowners are actually paying these rates right now, or something like that.
I just saw a number the other day, and it was higher than I expected for people whose mortgage was like north of 5 or 6 or something.
Huh.
It was like a decent sized number above 6 now. But I have it on. I can look it up for the effective mortgage rate versus the current stated. Yeah. It's been a slow climb for effective, as people aren't moving very much right now. So it's hard. Right. It's hard to, so you don't get much relief. But that's like the biggest area where like, I think it's easy to overlook the power for the whole American economy of a collective refi, and not just homeowners, but like businesses and everyone that got the refi lower. And then when you have the whole economy get to just change the math right, on their income statement. That's powerful.
Well, go look.
So
go look. Look, I'm not saying
now you don't get to do that.
and I'm not saying it's the only reason. It's not. But if you want proof, go look at the American economy, what it did from 1982 to 2020.
Yep, just basically a zigzag line, but a line with a clear trend.
Well, yeah, but okay, but yeah, and because you had the financial crisis in the middle of all
94,
that,
you had rates go up, but at the end of the day, the trend was clear.
yeah, go look at GDP expansion over that period of time, right? And there is no accident that corresponded with a 40-year lower rate recycle deal.
Right.
There's no question that played a role in it, right? Not the only part, but yeah, is it much harder to get that kind of dynamism and growth when it's going the other way? Yeah.
Yeah, unless you're going to go NERP, right? Negative interest rate policy. That's the only way you're getting a new low. And that would only be short rates, because my assumption there, unless you had the Fed back up the truck to buy the 10-year, like the 10-year would just be mad about that. And it would do the opposite. And the 10-year is the one where the mortgages are tied to. And the 5-year is the one that auto loans and business loans are tied to. So
yeah, you should never say never in this environment. But I mean, talk about something that needs to go on the trash heap of history, negative interest rates.
right. If we go there, then, we've just really jumped the shark.
Oh, yeah, that would be.
You'd reach the point where there's no point in selling duration. Just, you couldn't do it.
No.
To go back to my scary Argentina thing, if you go there, you're not selling duration the way, they couldn't for long stretches of time.
Well, not to mention you just see lending collapse.
Right.
I mean, why would you lend?
You get to the point where the government has to take the gun out and put it to the bank's head and go give people money.
Yep. And that's the frustration that I have with people talk about this kind of stuff. Well, what's wrong with negative interest? Do you want to lend money at that rate? Do you want to lend money at that rate?
Because the real rate will be wildly, wildly negative in that environment.
Oh,
which very much,
you might be running
messes up capitalism.
You could easily be running negative 8-9% on a real basis in that environment.
If we went negative interest rate policy, good chance you're running 5% inflation, So there's negative 5.
I don't know how you wouldn't.
Negative 6, whatever you have.
I don't know how you wouldn't.
Other than robbing the economy of interest income, maybe leading to some contraction, but which I am open to. But if financial assets do what we're talking about, then kind of all bets are off. Because financial assets as a percentage of GDP are they're in the stratosphere.
Did we buy more vol?
No. But Friday gets to be the key out there, I think. Although Monday could be, if you have some shakiness and that pushes you into negative gamma, you can start before Friday. Or if the Fed puts out some winky winkies about what's going to get said on Friday or whatever.
Feels like a good time to have some protection. That's not advice, not a recommendation, but definitely feels like a good time to have some protection. Well, what I do know, we've said this before.
It's at least price, right?
Yeah. Well, and that being said, I'm looking at the market going, to me, it feels like the market's on completely the wrong foot here. Again, not saying it should be collapsing. I'm not saying that.
No.
There's 18 million different reasons, and a lot of them are data-based to be concerned here. And this market isn't at all.
No.
I mean, you can nitpick and find some points of weakness, but not many.
Until today and yesterday, rates were underpinning the whole thing. But finally the back end has put a little discipline on the equity market. It looks like.
I wouldn't at all be surprised. Nothing would surprise me these days, but I wouldn't at all be surprised to see, kind of a renewing of that short dollar. Money flowing into international markets as soon as we turn the calendars over and get into Saturday or
September.
Yeah, September and October. And the reason I say this is, you've just gone now through a little bounce back in U.S. equities compared to the rest of the world. Yeah. If I'm an international investor, I'm going to take I wouldn't just sell out everything, but I've thought a lot about this. Every time I get a rip in relative performance against U.S. assets against the rest of the world, trim some profits and deploy the capital elsewhere. That's how I'd be handling it.
I cannot disagree at all.
Yeah.
I just wrote a piece about how the 5 countries that use a currency called peso are beating the U.S. year to date. 3 of them are completely smoking the U.S. That's the peso countries. That's the ones we all make fun of, right?
Well, and it's not just, I think the other important thing to point out too, is it's not just like a market reflexive thing. I mean, they're performing better economically.
Right. You look at their debt to GP, look at the PE ratios of their equities, the yield you get on their equities, and it all just screams buy pesos.
Yeah.
As it turns out.
I really like it. Anything else you got to add?
No, I think we're good.
One other thing I'd like to
go Browns, I'll add.
Oh, okay, here we go. The one other thing I'll add is that gold. I continue to be impressed by gold. I still think you have to test 3,500 or 3,000. I'll just be shocked if we don't do that. But miners seem to be breaking out.
Yeah, and gold, and that's important because gold is flat for 4 months now. We've gone nowhere for 4 months, and miners have not cared. They've been like, cool, we're making a bunch of money, we're going to go up.
I mean, they shouldn't care.
And without too much fanfare. Now, gold got heated on positioning and sentiment and stuff, but miners have not. So they've been kind of climbing their own wall of worry, which is, I mean, it's exactly what you would want to see.
Yep.
Now, obviously, if we get a risk off and gold goes down, yes, I'm sure miners will follow them and puke it up for 20% quickly, but like that would just be an opportunity.
Yeah,
because I mean the fundamentals are pretty nuts there.
No, it's
the generalist investor has definitely not tripped over that and did a little math on it. That's for sure.
You know what buying gold miners right now kind of reminds me of? You ever see some of these videos of these smash and grab jobs when they back their pickup truck like up to like a mini mart ATM and just yank it right out of there? Buying gold miners feels like that to me.
I can't argue. If you look at like the forward PE ratio, and you could pick just about any miner or the whole index. You look at that forward PE ratio, and we're up like 50, 60% on the year for gold miners. And then you look at that forward PE, and it's like, it's not really moving. It's still really low. It's telling you like, well, remember, this is all fundamentals in the price.
And so much of those PE ratio, those forward PE ratios are based on the company's own projections. And those companies are all projecting typically.
They're all anchoring to like $2,500.
Yeah. Like I said,
I will add one caveat, and that is, oil's free right now, and that really helps. But man, when you look at the fundamentals of oil, at least for now, it suggests it's going to be hard for that to go up.
Well,
unless we're dead serious about this, going after Russian oil thing. But I just take the other side. Something
else that we should look into is, if I was a gold miner, and I'm not usually in favor of this, but in this environment, if I was a gold miner, I think I'd be hedging oil here.
You'd be crazy not to have a bunch of oil calls.
Yeah, right? Why not? That's what I would do. Anyway, anything else?
No, I think we're all set.
All right, folks, have a wonderful weekend. Thank you for listening. As always, get the video feed on YouTube. Just Google Know Your Risk Podcast. We're not hard to find on all the social media, the Instaface, as Chase likes to say. And have a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday. You're listening to the Know Your Risk Podcast. Download and subscribe at knowyourriskpodcast.com.
Investment advice cannot be given without a client service agreement. Zach Abraham is an investment advisor representative of Trek Financial, an SEC registered investment advisor. Bulwark Capital Management is a marketing name only and does not carry a separate registration.